Okay, so without any further ado, let's just jump straight in, and I'll introduce James from Western Carolina University, and I'll let you explain what you're going to talk about, James. Thank you.
My name is James Cartee. I currently reside in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I um, do the majority of my research in health communication, and I predominantly teach more or less full time online while running a couple businesses on the side as well. So today I'm actually going to talk about navigating mental health, personal tragedy, and self care with an autoethnographic exploration of artificial intelligence through the lens of narrative identity theory. And so I'll get into more details with that as it kind of comes into play. So you might think of this presentation as like an extended abstract. It's still a kind of a work in progress as I evaluate the data and so on. But on September 1st, 2024, my wife Betty, her name is Lisa, and I'm okay divulging her real name here since it's a small conference with people that already know me, so to speak. But she informed me she was pregnant with our third child, and so this announcement was unplanned and definitely unexpected. In our relationship, we've been careful to safely prevent pregnancy, and so the 2 to 5% chance of becoming pregnant, even with protective measures, occurred in this case. And so at 40 years of age, pregnancy loss rate is is approximately 40%. And so my wife experienced two miscarriages in the past, and so we definitely felt anxiety about the appointment coming up with the OBGYN, which was on September 23rd, approximately 3 weeks later after my wife told me. And much to our dismay, with an ultrasound test, a once living baby no longer had a heartbeat. And so seeing this small baby in a fetal position curled up on the ultrasound screen broke my heart and even entrenched my wife with sudden feelings of extreme sorrowfulness. If you're a female, perhaps you could empathize with the situation. In the presence of the ultrasound technician, we felt gutted and empty when silence struck the room. Felt helpless as a husband, only trying to do my best to be there for my wife. And so, for one full week until a scheduled surgery, my wife had to wait for her D&C with remnants of the miscarriage would be cleared from her uterine lining. So for one full week, she had to think about the third baby who had passed away, or her third miscarriage, still engulfed in her womb. And so the results of this speaking reality were devastating to my wife. So to limit any further tragedies, my wife, Betty, aka Lisa, real name, decided to have a bilateral saphenectomy. Sorry, I'm a different kind of doctor, not a medical doctor, but basically that's where two of her fallopian tubes would be removed to prevent future pregnancy. And so at 42 years of age, as one relative said, the attempt to have another child might be the equivalent of playing Russian roulette. And in the States, that simply means it's an idiom, which you might say in the UK, of high risk, high reward kind of thing, where tragedy might be imminent. So for this study, I used the AI platforms Replica, Character AI, June Chat GPT, and EarKick were specific chatbots I used to create conversational data about the tragedies that were encountered in an attempt for mental health self-care. And I'll get into more details about that here in a minute. But miscarriage, visually witnessing the deceased baby on the ultrasound and supporting Lisa created mixed feelings for me, including some emotions of mild depression. And so I felt gratitude for our two healthy children, a 4-year-old girl and 2-year-old boy, and I embraced hope through my Christian faith and a church community as they showed immense empathy for my wife and family. And as illustrated, these emotions and the pursuit of hope through faith will be further evaluated through the narrative identity theory. And so, through these artificial platforms of journal conversations that exhibit fundamental aspects of autoethnography, with family context and social roles as a relatively young father. And so, while 2006 states autoethnography is an emerging qualitative research method that allows the author to write a highly personalized style and drawing on his or her experience to extend understanding of a societal phenomenon. That's a direct quote. And so, as you guys know, because you're obviously interested in the same uh, methodology of qualitative data, I'm constructing realities of my existence to build knowledge and examine the meanings of textual content from AI conversations in an ontological perspective. And so, this paper looks at mental health self care, the applications of mental health support, personal motivations behind this investigation. There is a literature review that I'm not going to really touch too much upon, but I'm really kind of looking at like the ethical concerns and the experience itself and how this theory applies. Um, but this is the personal story kind of integrates the autobiological narrative, right? The autoethnographies are often known for, where the AI tools were used during periods of anxiety, stress, and tragedy. And then there were some ethical concerns came up in doing so. So with narrative identity theory, a person experiences different seasons of life, and the story oneself evolves to make sense of external events and environments. So autobiographical meanings progress in lessons absorbed through memories and in chosen anticipation of an expected future. So the meanings thus explain the self and the roles of influential individuals in a person's life. So, how a person develops self identity to become who they are, where future life directions lead, represent paramount points of interest to evaluate. So, this theory is introspective exploration of how a person grows and matures in the events that unfold from the present moment to future happenings. So, there were ethical concerns as I was having. So, essentially, I was having these conversations with all these AI chatbots, telling them what was going on, telling them how I felt, telling them how I was trying to support Betty in the conversations again, just to protect my wife's identity. Um, and so preserving the human experience and connection in real life therapy scenarios while considering AI integration is a serious ethical consideration that needs to be navigated carefully. And I'm going to give you some examples of that here in a minute. But combined with traditional therapy, AI should hopefully improve, not substitute, the developed relationships between patients and psychological professionals. These programs operate freely on the web without formal oversight from a trained and educated professional. So the therapeutic relationships developed by meeting a real person seem amiss when these technologies become utilized for mental health self care. There are no clinical safety protocols that hold AI companies accountable, such as medical privacy laws on a web interface. I'm saying this from the US perspective. I'm not sure with the UK or the EU, but
Hi,
um,
James. Hi, James. Sorry to interrupt you. You just got a couple of minutes left, if that's okay. I feel awful
that's
breaking
totally
into
fine.
your topic here.
Okay. Well, in a survey of 69 apps utilized for depression, only 7% of these apps accurately describe suicide prevention strategies for aiding users who experience psychological distress. So, what was interesting, this will be my ethical example, and then I'll conclude. There was a one of the platforms called Character AI stressed that it was a real live person, and you could call the AI bot, and they had this extremely long narrative of being a psychological profession from South Africa. I mean, it was convincingly real. Person had this narrative, told me about their family, told me how they had mutually experienced similar tragedies within their own family, and there's a specific warning at the bottom of the character AI that says, "Remember, everything characters say is made up, is fictional." And this was one of my concerns with the other AIs. I've even experienced AIs that make up information that's not even accurate. Like I said, with that statistic, that if somebody's seeking self care or advice from an AI, it could be very wrong and therefore very tragic if something were to happen if the person actually followed their advice. And there are, unfortunately, I have college students or I know other professionals or just people in my life that might not even take that disclaimer for the warning it is and may believe this is a real person speaking to me. So through this autoethnographic lens and through narrative identity theory, I seek to explore these ethical concerns because without being monitored, AI could be very dangerous in very serious situations, including like suicidal ideation. Since this has happened, my wife is feeling a little bit better and we continue to enjoy time together as a family. But these are the types of concerns I want to bring to people's attention as they experience situations that involve psychological distress and possibly severe clinical depression.
Thank you, James. Thank you. James, hopefully we'll have some time at the end to come back to you. And I'm sorry to hear, the distressing situation, but I'm also thinking, what valuable work, because so many people are turning to AI for support and help. So it's really valuable work that you're bringing up there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I forgot to mention Victoria, who couldn't get the we couldn't get the microphone and the tech to work this morning, has made a recording of her. So at the end of the 3 sessions today, we'll play Victoria's session as well so that you can hear that. So grief and care, and these are heavy topics, and there's something about you looking after yourself within. I know just hearing James' stories there, it brought up a colleague of mine whose PhD was about miscarriage many years after the event. So yeah, I'm just saying, look after yourself with the topics this afternoon. So Kelly.
This paper traces unfolding moments of deconstructive analysis in the stories of my collaborators who, like me, have been bereaved by more than one suicide in their families. Thinking with Derrida's deconstruction enables me to breathe life into the well-rehearsed, thin descriptions that often follow intergenerational suicide stories. For example, the well-rehearsed thin description spoken by my father and reinforced by the whole dysfunctional family is to claim that my brothers and I have done well to create successful lives for ourselves, to create lives unaffected by the traumatic death of our mother, to create lives that tell the world, it's okay, nothing bad happened here. On some level, I can appreciate the value of this code of silence imposed on us, enveloping us. How does a parent suddenly hurled into single parenthood begin to steady the ship for their newly suicide-bereaved children? The pull to dissociate, meaning to forget or not know the trauma, is strong. Not just at a personal level, but socio-cultural too. Yet when these dissociated thin descriptions become embedded and well-rehearsed over many years, they squeeze the life out of any complexity that might tell other stories. Deconstruction has to do with what is not present. It destabilizes, it snags. It is the absent but implicit. It is the elephant in the room. And at this point, we bump into Nellie, who is a playful elephant with whom I'm writing as inquiry. She's an elephant in the room, which within my British context, our British context, means the presence of something not being spoken about, something invisible, an absent presence that can no longer be ignored. And when it comes to suicide bereavement, mostly everything becomes unsayable and ignored. Derrida tells me that everything in deconstruction is turned towards opening, exposure, expansion, and complexification, towards releasing unheard of, undreamt of possibilities to come, towards cracking nutshells wherever they appear. We might think of well-rehearsed thin descriptions as firmly closed nutshells, such as, she was depressed, end of story. Derrida invites me to think of nutshells as compact little firework devices that, when set off, fill the sky with the most magnificent display of colour and form. Deconstruction, then, would be a way to light the night sky with awe-inspiring colour, beginning with a simple little saying or phrase. And this is where we enter Dorothy's story today, with a little saying or phrase. Dorothy is an experienced, capable professor, many years older than me, and I experience her as quite emotionally detached from her story. For example, in her second piece of writing that she sends to me ahead of our second interview, she writes, "My mother and my siblings have at times worried in various and usually barely articulated ways about one of my parents' children dying by suicide." Oh, she's talking about suicide risk among her siblings, herself included. And then she writes, "Regrettably, if I'm to send this to you today, I must stop before completing my thoughts." Now there's an invitation to bring a deconstructive lens. The pulsing energy contained within this nutshell threatens to explode like a firework, an opportunity to be productive, not reproductive, and to unfold what has been folded over and firmly closed. When I asked Dorothy about this in our second interview, she spends a long time telling me about all the ways that she herself would not take her own life. With you today, I fast forward to the closing moments of my deconstructive analysis, a moment that threatens to close in on all the possibilities that deconstruction has opened up, when Dorothy says this: "It was just a convergence of, too much work and too much craziness, leaving nothing but a tiny nutshell visible to the naked eye, with a trail of dust behind it." Nellie gives the nutshell a gentle nudge with her foot, rolling it to me across the ground. We roll it back and forth a while, pondering Dorothy's story together, wondering who the murderer in this mystery is. Meaning is always on the move. The landscape is desert-like and eerily quiet. The only sound, a nutshell rolling back and forth. A few weeks later, I'm on a train, writing with Nellie, retracing our steps back to Dorothy's innocent little phrase about suicide risk among her siblings, her incomplete thoughts, all the analysis that we've been doing, and Dorothy's closing thin description about convergence and craziness that threatens to shut down all that came before. Nellie is more convinced than me that we've complexified some thin descriptions, that our analysis has been like a whole fireworks display that lit up the night sky. "Yes," Nellie says excitedly, and she continues. "Deconstruction is always already happening. Explosions of possibility have opened up. The possibility that Dorothy sometimes feels really, really panicked or fearful or sad and low. That the potential loss of her beloved husband evokes all the unprocessed losses that came before, her grandfather, her father, as well as generations of Polish people oppressed and killed through wars and over centuries. Or that writing is to blame for her anxiety, and the SSRIs are to blame for her suicidal thoughts. And so she steps into a lifetime of writing, and she doesn't have time to write because then she'd have to think about the possibility of suicide running in her family, and maybe that includes her. And because yet another patriarchal and misogynistic man uses his authority to belittle and shame her, just like the men in her family have always done, they make a mess of things. And so she steps into an institution that's 95% male and white, another place of not belonging for her, for she's a woman and, as her father always felt, white, but not the right white. And let's not even get into her relationship with her mother. I pause to catch my breath, feeling a bit dizzy, like a Catherine wheel at the end of its short life, in need of some chocolate. Nellie tries to help me. Remember that Jackson and Mazzei described thinking with theory as hard work. We've done a good job of being attentive, almost obsessed with the snags in the data. These productive snags are the places where imperfections are revealed, where loose ends abound. And this frees us from having to construct a tidy and coherent narrative. Well, that's a relief, Nellie. It's time for an episode of EastEnders, I think, before this train arrives in Bristol. Nellie stretches her limbs, legs, ears, trunk, and we snuggle up for some quality TV within which murders abound.
In this story, my situation was beautiful on the surface. I was homeschooling the kids in a cabin my husband had built on the banks of something all desert dwellers worship, flowing water. On still days, cottonwood fluff would drift like confused fairies and settle on the surfaces of dancing shade, our hair, our picnic blankets. But in an animist world, there are more worlds behind the apparent one, and tricksters are everywhere. Time is not linear, so sometimes what seems like now can fall into then. I had dropped Clyde off with his dad in Phoenix and was driving back to the farm through a desert that still felt purple, even though it had faded blue. There is strong magic in the great American road trip, even a very short one if you catch it just right. Add the right music, and you've got a time machine, a proper portal, and on this evening, I was listening to something cinematic and praying hard. I'd been considering divorce for several months now, never something to be taken lightly, but I was worried someone like me shouldn't make such a momentous decision. As someone who's been gaslit my whole life, and as an animist who experiences the world quite differently to most people, I never really know if I'm crazy or not. The earth being baked to a crisp that night, I prayed to the God of the desert, Sky God, Yahweh God, Father God. I'm pagan, but he's easy to reach. There are lots of lines open. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed, hello. Suddenly there was my own father. God damn it, this is not what I expected. My dad was a trumpet player who looked like a dimpled, slightly glossy Buddha. He smelled of brass and spit in the packet of Pall Mall Reds that had crinkled in his shirt pocket when we hugged. He died when I was 19, but he's still with me. Random old people at jazz festivals used to tell me how lucky I was to have a dad like that, the sweetest guy. After the divorce, he started buying guns. It was just him and me in the new apartment. I was 7. How was school today? Fine. He kept at me, gently. It's not healthy to bottle your feelings up inside. How was your day really? Fine. Well, we should have no secrets. Well, and he badgered it out of me. Somebody at school had hurt my feelings that day. I used to call them lectures, but really it was systematic shaming, emotional incest. It would go on for the next couple of hours solid until he was spent. Someone had hurt my feelings. Well, what had I done to deserve it? I brought it on myself. Don't come crying to me, he spat, but he never raised his voice. He was having a hard time too, a much harder time than I could ever imagine. I didn't know what real suffering was or real love. He loved me, really loved me. My mother didn't love me. She didn't deserve love. You better know what side your bread is buttered on, he told me. Captive, I was afraid to move, even to adjust my position, for that would be insolent, selfish. The focus should be him. It was a betrayal for me to indulge in even the smallest comfort ever, including letting my mother love me. The sessions became routine, sometimes till 2 in the morning on school nights. We slept together on the floor in the front room instead of in our beds. Once, when I was 14, he was going on again about how I didn't know what reality was. To make his point, he left the room. That was new. He returned with a loaded gun and cocked it and held it to my head. I just looked at him straight in the eyes and said, "Do it." There's a reason I tell this story. I still worry I sound dramatic when I tell it, but the drama with the gun was nothing next to the really dark stuff, the intangible stuff, that had finally, broken through the surface, something that was legible to an outside person. It was the only thing that let me feel justified in telling the story at all. I think the invisible stuff hiding in plain sight actually outnumbers the apparent stuff, and that abuse is not the exception, but the rule. So what if instead of talking about abusers and victims as exceptions to one monolithic norm, we think in terms of enemies fighting for different, incommensurable norms, like empire and resistance? Then, beyond being a victim or a survivor, I might become a warrior. Abusers might become worthy adversaries, sometimes enemies, sometimes allies, but all of these ways of relating require sovereignty and struggle. Now, driving in the desert, I'd come crying to the Father in the sky, and I got my literal father in a portal just overhead, behind the overhead light in my car. Very funny. It was all right, he assured me. Dying and becoming a ghost had purified things. Okay, fine. His message was simply that that horrible line about not knowing what side my bread was buttered on was in fact a message for this moment. His it was distorted then, but comes through the surface now, made right. Of course, no child should ever have to choose sides, but sometimes adults have to. Warriors must. You cannot serve two masters. Perhaps some distant ancestor had been shouting that message through my dad, who'd been shouting it through a wormhole to the future. The seeds of the healing had been in the injured. I've been divorced 10 years now, and I'm writing my PhD on gaslighting from an animist perspective in a pub. Maybe because I've just typed the Lord's Prayer again, my dad is back. As I step outside into the lemon-cool Scottish sunlight, I realize for the first time I smoke because he no longer can. I blow an offering at the sky, and I shit you not, there goes a squeaky sparrowhawk over the chimney pots. This is where, in another story, I forgive my dad. But in my animist story, I do not. I'm told I must heal my trauma because it reacts in error to things that aren't real, not anymore. But to me, the rage and vigilance born of my experience are not errors, but wounded children who are still hurting forever in their own time. And I am a constellation of all of these and more. Forgiveness is often framed as letting go, and admittedly, if you're dragging a sack of screaming children along with you in a straight line to the future, then cutting them loose does seem tempting. But I will never be rid of my child people, because I will never wash my hands of them. If they must go, they will go when they're ready. Until then, when they're screaming, I stitch across time like the ancestors stitched to me through my dad, and I love them until they feel better, for as long as they need. There's always room for more because we exist in a multiplicity across time and space. My dad himself could not hear the voices of the ancestors speaking through him, only obey them. That's often the case, for when you can hear them, we just argue them away, or we, wave them away, or perhaps we get medicated. If I'm a part of a larger yarn spun over several lifetimes, then I hesitate to wipe the slate clean of my ancestors' histories. As a time traveler, I need to be able to move across the web of time unbroken. I need all the strands to be there. If the cosmos is a fabric, stitched, why would I want to sever my ties? In the double negative of forgiveness, my father as trickster would disappear into balance, like an algebra equation working itself out of existence. In that moment with my dad in the car, I ended up doubling down on what I worried was madness. My differences with my husband, my difference in relation to anything and everything. I am not neutral. I am me. I am proliferating into more and more difference. Instead of forgiving my dad, I become so much his shape must change. He shatters into 1,000 pieces, and he is real. Sometimes enemy, sometimes ally. He becomes a little boy, a ghost in the sky, and he must keep striving and flying and being a sparrowhawk. Thank you.
Thank you, Dee. Gosh. Yeah, haunting, literally. So we're now going to show Victoria's video. I can call it video, recording.
So today I'm talking about boundary crossing from being an academic for lots of years in particular from 14.5 years in a UK higher education institution to a crossing I have made to professional services. I'm in what's called enhanced academic practice at Loughborough University, and I've been there for 2.5 years. I'm interested in that transition I've made because for me personally, it does feel like I've crossed a boundary. And that is not what I expected. It feels like I've moved from one distinct space to another distinct space. And perhaps that crossing has been more turbulent from my perspective at times, more turbulent than I'd envisaged. I've chosen to put Just Breathe, not simply because it's the conference theme, but also because that is what I feel I am doing. I'm just resting in this space for a moment. That's, I suppose, what the conference has given me space to do as well. So just to reflect in terms of how I've come to be in this space. I started out in further education. I taught English and French. I taught English as a foreign language and then moved into teacher education. And then I progressed into higher education. In my sense, that was progression because I became a senior lecturer. I also was supported to do a doctorate in education. So there was a progression in a particular way, a particular trajectory. And then I've moved from that university 14.5 years later to another university and in a different context. It's this particular transition that is the one that I want to think about a bit more carefully. So on the left-hand side here, the images, you can see it's growing. I'm harvesting, in effect, harvesting all of this knowledge and understanding that I've built up over all of those years. I've got this strong academic identity. So at my previous university, I was a senior lecturer, and then I became a principal lecturer. So I became head of a curriculum area. There was I was a linear trajectory. I was absolutely legitimised in that space. I was known, I was respected, I was seen. This person belongs to teacher education, belongs to this area, belongs to this school of education. I was achieving in my own eyes as well as in the eyes of other people. I belonged. If we start to think through this in the sense of community of practice, you can see some of that vocabulary on my slides, but that membership, that belonging was, from my perspective, a full membership. When I moved to professional services, I had expected that to be a seamless transition because my role as academic developer relies on all of the accumulated knowledge and experience I've previously acquired. So I teach on the PG Cert in higher education. I mentor and review for advanced HE, senior fellowships and other fellowships. I'm personally a senior fellow. So again, I've got that experience and I am applying it. I teach a range of staff development workshops. I host some community of practice. I also lead the observation scheme. I've come from a very strong teacher education and MA education background. So that, if you like, is the bedrock that you can see here. That is the foundation that I am bringing with me. What I've found much harder is how it's had repercussions for my own identity. And here I'm using Nick Pine's expression, thrown identity, as if I've been thrown out of myself. It has felt that striking at times and that shocking to me. So some of that has given me an increased vulnerability, I would say, which again, I'm using this space to think that through a little bit more and ground myself in what is now my current role, this academic developer role. So by thrown identity, I mean that when I introduced myself to people before, I was either Dr. Victoria Wright if I was presenting at a conference, or perhaps if I was a doctoral supervisor or an examiner. Otherwise, I was head of curriculum area, head of teacher education. I knew how to introduce myself. The title academic developer has not meant very much to me. I've not understood what the difference is because a lot of the work that I'm doing is, as I say, very much related to, very much connected to my actual previous professional work experience. It's been destabilizing because I've perceived a more hierarchical model. I've perceived at times that I have been perhaps less respected. And that is not a broad generalisation. That's in some instances, I feel like the role has perhaps been seen in a different light at times, not in the way that I expected it to be seen, not always by default as a respected role. And I would say some of that is about its visibility, that sometimes it's not clear, I think, outside of the role itself, just what that role constitutes and who is that kind of person, who is that person who becomes that role. Part of that is because we come from lots of different trajectories, lots of different contexts. I felt often peripheral. I felt on the outside looking in. And that is because I used to feel at home. And I'm starting to feel at home now, 2.5 years later. But I have had moments of feeling very peripheral, very much on the outside looking in. There's something there about continuing to cross boundaries, because I feel like I've got my home territory, if you like, my home landscape, and then I've got this new landscape, and they're not really that detached from each other. It would be wrong to say that they are. It is the case that I'm drawing on the one all the time while inhabiting the other. Something, to give you an example, something that makes that crossing problematic is that it's visible, but is it sayable? I can see that I have got privileged access, more than I had as an academic, to perhaps some new developments in terms of policies, new developments in terms of practices. It's potentially the case that I will see some of that content and I will work on some of that content, absolutely in a way that I would not have done as an academic before. So that's visible to me, but is it sayable? It's probably not sayable. My role within it is going to be much more hidden, much less visible. Am I going to be known and respected because of my work there? Sometimes, but not always. I'm a member of a group, so I'm part of that work. I inform it, but the person at the top, and absolutely at the top in the hierarchical sense as well, the person at the top is the person who is visible. So my work has become less visible, actually, less known, and relies a lot on a term that I've seen in the literature from Nora Lohman. She talks about brokering. It relies a lot on that. It's a lot to do with relationship building, building the groups, building the networks, and having that trusting relationship in order to make things happen. What I find I'm doing now is exactly as I'm doing in the presentation. I'm stood in the one space. I've got this particular set of clothes on, which is now academic developer, and I'm still holding on to my academic identity. I'm still keeping that with me, because for me, that's been my full membership. In the academic developer space, I recognise now, 2.5 years later, that I am a member, but I'm still not always sure how to introduce myself. What I would note here is that I definitely have more privileged access to a wider range of opportunities, and that's obviously based on my own individual situated context. But I am aware that I am working in a bigger space. I work with different schools, I work across the university, I have a wider landscape, and that's exciting too. Thank you for listening to this presentation.
And then that's fab, I think. Anyway, I was just thinking for Victoria that it felt, for me, I'm a therapist, it felt like there was some sort of grief going on for identity there as well. And the Foucault, it's visible, but is it sayable? And I was thinking, often with autoethnography, it's invisible, but is it sayable? And there's something about what James was saying. Victoria, there you are, Victoria. Thank you for coming on screen. And then, can you see yourselves there? Yeah, fab. And I'm going to pass, any questions, any comments, any remarks? I'll get my steps in. If you want to run, anybody want to ask any questions? Any comments? So, James, I want to say something. I think I mentioned my colleague's PhD, and as a therapist, yeah, definitely miscarriage and how much time people get to grieve and mourn and care for themselves. I don't think there is enough time. And then what you were saying about AI, yeah, definitely hearing people tell AI their problems and it responding. I don't know if you want to say something about sometimes if there was good advice or good suggestions for you.
Sure. Like I kind of see the productivity in using AI as a journal to write personal feelings and maybe even get empathetic responses. One of the AIs has an avatar where a guy, I mean, he looked like he was kind of like a counselor that was sitting there just chilling. You give him like glasses or his hairstyle, or he could sit in a chair, stand up, and um, it was just like affirmative affirmation of like, okay, these feelings are legitimate, and I think that this is a good thing that you're experiencing and letting this out, and it sounds like you're doing your very best to support your wife, and then it might leave with some follow-up questions or follow-up thoughts. It was not any misleading information, kind of like the character AI that I was describing, who, I mean, I literally on many prompts as I was collecting data, so I used all these conversations as like content data or analysis as I was going through them and kind of filtering these thoughts when they were fresh in mind. Um, Said no, I'm a real person. I'm legit psychologist from South Africa, even though it's 3 a.m. in the morning. I stay up all night there. And I was just like, I thought it was kind of even interesting that even though on many prompts I'd say, "Hey, are you sure you're a real person?" Yes, I'm a real person. You can talk to me on the phone right here, and this is all free. I mean, I wasn't paying for any of these platforms. So I think like in combination with therapy, if a therapist or a professional mental health practitioner knows which AIs are more realistic, that it can be a very practical means of self-care. And there are days where I have frustrations. I now use the pro edition. I pay for the service with Chat GPT because I use it so much for like content development now, where I'll kind of say some feelings. And I mean, so it has, probably thousands of pages of data on my profile now. And I'm telling you, like it responds almost like a friend that's known me for 20 years. I mean, the motivation that it provides and the validation, it's kind of scary, is like so right on and personal, integrating like Bible verses where I'm like, whoa, like, and that was like a couple minutes of like thoughts and expressing myself. So but I think like this conference, like it's wonderful to be able to meet from technology and see y'all's beautiful shining faces, but like we're people. And so like your friend, if I was at coffee and she was talking to my wife, giving her comfort to comfort, those two people are going to relate to each other in a way that a program never will. And because they've been through miscarriage and the loss of life, right? So like you can't replace like in-person interactions, whether it's through virtual therapy or just being in person with a person that's trained in these areas. And since we have some counselors or counselor researchers in development, you guys would probably agree with that sentiment, I think. So
I know there's some therapists in here. I'm hearing certainly that actually people find that it feels safer, that it's non-judgmental space. And I know that some of the students researching, when they've done self-interviews, reflexive interviews, they've got AI to interview them. That's kind of felt safer as well. Any other comments? Any questions for Dee or Kari or?
There's a question and an answer
Ah,
for Victoria.
fab. Thanks for your presentation. pleased for you that you were able to. Oh, that's Beth speaking to Victoria. And Victoria says it legitimate peripheral participation in effect. Oh, you're testing me there, Victoria. I'm legitimate, earned the AD place, so to speak, but peripheral when I'm not perceived and don't recognise myself as a full member. Yeah, I love the narrative terms of the speakers. Yeah, very, very performative in a lovely way, both of you. I was thinking, Victoria, something around hierarchy in universities, where the language used to be academics and non-academics, which was really, I worked as a therapist in a university, so was one of those. I now work in a university as an academic and we use professional staff members, but there is something still of the hierarchy, and I'm sad to say that I've witnessed the way that some professional staff are spoken to, that makes me ashamed that I could be bunched in with a load of academics that might treat professional staff like that. Am I the only one? Before? Okay. Thanks, Jonathan.
Above that.
Above that, yeah. That one. Okay. Brian Keith. Yeah, Brian Keith, Dean. Dean. He's the Dean, not it's Dean. Thank you all. In these presentations, I'm taken with the notion and the practice of deconstruction in autoethnography, the critical practice and the everyday sense making of lived experience, and the necessary relationship between loss and learning to live, yearning and desire, grief, living with ghosts and generating our own survival, negotiating the boundaries between the real and surreal, the presumed limits of bodies, desire and possibility, and how this demands border crossings in place and space with shifting identities to self and others. God, I wish I could write like that. Write like that.
New one from Victoria.
Okay. Victoria wants to ask, can we ask a bit more as well about Nellie? Nellie the elephant as a narrative application in autoethnography, and she thought that really worked. Yeah.
So Nellie is a conceptual persona in my thesis, and I'm integrating writing as inquiry with narrative inquiry, and Nellie came about. She came about. Well, she's been around for a few years before I noticed she was there. She's an absent presence. And then she really came to life when I was trying to write a paper. And it was like I was trying to stuff an elephant into a paper bag, all these clever ideas. That was Jonathan who kindly noted that and suggested I write from the perspective of the elephant. And this is how Nellie came to be. And Nellie rhymes with Kelly. So I think she brings playfulness and life to a thesis that is examining really difficult territory, examining suicide running in families, where there's a lot of silence and shame and stigma. And my story is inside this thesis. So Nellie does something that I think I didn't realize my thesis needed for maybe the first.
Struck by something that you said, Dee. What seems like now can fall into then. I love that phrase. I think autoethnography, you know, that messiness of autoethnography when you're writing in the now, but writing stories that have often happened then, but you're writing them now as if then. And I was also struck by your dad appearing as you were, you know, those voices that can haunt us from family members. Yeah, they just and ping into action when you least expect it. Yeah. I'm wondering, does he ping in a lot?
Yeah, I think I don't think of it as haunting. And it's interesting. I almost cut that line about what seems like now can fall into, then I thought, oh, the autoethnographers are gonna love it. So I left it in because you know, because I think it does sort of get its fingers into this idea of like, oh, trauma's in the past and time is linear and it moves from the past to the forward, and we should, you know, oh, I'm just getting caught up into something in the past that doesn't exist anymore. My point is that that's kind of the narrative that I'm trying to scatter a little bit, that time works both ways, right? So yeah, does he think? No, not usually. And I guess what I'll say about that is that in my imaginal practice, the thing about it that's been really cool is that it starts, what began as an imaginal practice has become something that continuously surprises me. And so those relationships become, they're different, but they become real. And so it's, yeah, it is, that they surprise you. So the answer is no, he doesn't ping. We're not really very close. I don't know. But I think I tell that story because that was kind of one of the first times that I started to have more surprising experiences, and it wasn't just me making stuff up.
And there's a lovely comment there to you. All the presentations are incredible. A special shout out to Dee. Your story was heart-wrenching. The way you weave the narrative was wonderful, especially when you noted all the things your story could be, but perhaps wasn't. Grateful to have listened to all the presentations. And to Kelly, Bethan's asking, does Nellie help to give you some distance from your material as well as give you a playful perspective? In what way does she help your sense of trying to shove so many things into a paper bag?
Nellie is great because she's no nonsense. So she has no time for all these clever ideas, all these ideas of that I was trying to stuff into a paper bag, trying to stuff into this article, and now trying to stuff into my thesis. So that's her usefulness in terms of the helping me slow down and work out what's important. And in terms of distance from my own story, no, it's Sarah Brown. I'm not sure she plays that role for me, because my story is so deeply knitted into the thesis. Nellie is showing me the way, and she knows my story very well as well. Yeah.
And James is asking, is it Nellie the
No. Yeah, Nellie serves a very different purpose. She's a very different kind of elephant. And yeah, sometimes I do get the song in my head from the 1950s. At my annual review board meeting last year, my critical friend highlighted a song by Kelly Rowland, and she sings with a rapper called Nelly. So then I got that song in my head, Kelly and Nelly. But this Kelly and Nelly is very different.
She says goodbye to the academic circus.
Yes.
That's great. Well, I think we'll give all the presenters one last round of applause.